People want to do it all at once. They want to make an app perfect the first time. That is just not a realistic world. You have to make something small and you need to perfect that flow. You maintain what was working and you add and take little risks as you go. If you try to do it all at once, you're probably just going to end up with a mess and it will never go anywhere.
Are you a developer, marketer, or entrepreneur who dreams of seeing your app rise to the top of the charts? Well, today's your lucky day. Welcome to the DesignRush podcast, where we bring you game changers and innovators who can help you drive your business forward. I'm your host and senior editor at DesignRush, Bianca Mayer. Joining us today is a true expert in the field, John Driscoll. He's the founder and CEO of Naked Development, a leading mobile app development company, bringing innovative design and intuitive programming to the market. So John, I'd really like you to tell me a little bit of your journey in app development, like how you started out, especially actually before the App Store existed.
So my first startup was a financial firm that I started and sold around 2006. And so that was a year before the iPhone. And so at that time, I kind of like the reason why my firm did really well is my ability to market on the internet. That was really kind of one of the real secrets to our success at the time. Once that happened, my plan was to always go into consulting of some kind, but the market kind of was not doing great. So I got out a little faster than I wanted to.
Good.
And yeah, so
yeah, I mean, it helps.
The timing's always good. Yeah.
The timing is always right. Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, they always say, new things grow out of a bad market. And I actually really believe that. So I got into consulting. I was doing really internet consulting, marketing consulting, and March 6, 2008 happened, which was, do you know?
Yes, of course. It was the economic collapse, wasn't it? It was like when the recession started.
It was right around that time, but a more significant thing for me was the first day of the App Store.
Oh, right, of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, there was this presentation that Steve Jobs gave, and it was not one of his, fancier ones. It was like a smaller gathering, and I watched it, and it was all about how we were going to be able to make apps. And at the time, people don't remember, but the only apps that were on your phone for a whole year were only the apps that Apple gave you.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. So there wasn't much. I think it was like 12. I think that was all we had. So they came out and they said, you could be a developer. And I said, that sounds awesome. I signed up the first day. I had no idea what I was doing. But I figured it out. Yeah.
Amazing. And I actually think I looked into this story of yours a little bit of when you went to go and see Steve Jobs's keynote speak. And I think you went to your partner, Jason, correctly. And you were like, stop what you're doing. We have to start developing apps right now. So
his office was right next door to mine, and I rushed in there right after the presentation, and I said, "Dude, stop everything." Exactly. And he's just like in the middle of doing, I think he was working on an email or something, and he's like, "I'm gonna stop doing everything. We've got to change everything we're doing. We're gonna make apps." And he's like, "Make apps?" I didn't. Yeah.
What was actually the first app that you guys started working on around that time?
Yeah, so the first one, it's funny. There was one I worked on that was for a church. That was one of them. It never went live, but I made it and I showed it and I tried to sell it to them. But at the time, people didn't know they needed them. It was really hard to convince people that their company or their organization needed an app. I know that sounds crazy now. But back then, people weren't convinced. And so then we made this restaurant app. And then we made this golf app for Kevin Costner funded that one, actually. So, so it was very early stuff. And they were clunky and not very good. But we were working on it. Yeah.
Okay. And I think you guys ranked like 25th on the App Store. Am I correct in saying that with the golfing app, right?
We got into the top 20.
Oh, it's
on the first day with
yeah.
no marketing. Yeah, it was nuts. Yeah, it was just like it just kept getting downloaded, and we had 10,000 downloads the first day without any marketing. We didn't. I don't even know if we had a landing page. Like it was just like there was nothing. It was
That's crazy.
crazy. You didn't have to do much in those days. Yeah.
I think you guys obviously like hit a sweet spot with golfing with that one for sure. Like
Yeah.
obviously a lot of people were.
The golf course
Did you
right
guys
now.
know that was going to happen with that app, or did you just create it and were surprised that it actually made it that far so quickly?
Yeah, we had no idea. No. In fact, what's interesting is the expectations of the owner at the time, not Kevin Costner, but the other, was he wasn't happy with those numbers, and I'm like, are you kidding me? Like that's insane. So expectations are a killer. Yeah. So anyway.
Geez, that's amazing. There must have been some challenges there. I mean, you guys now had this opportunity to be developers for Apple, and you actually, well, technically for Apple, you're designing apps for them and all the stuff you're able to upload them. So what were some of like the major challenges back then? I know maybe you guys weren't really sure what you were doing at the time, but was there anything else like in the industry as a whole? And how did you overcome them at that time?
Yeah, well, some of the first challenges is even finding programmers who worked in that language, right? So it was Objective-C in those days, and there wasn't, I think the biggest thing is some of the products we were making. The first product we released was another golf app, and at the time, not enough people had iPhones for it to really work in critical mass. So if we went to an event, like maybe 20% of the people had an iPhone.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a real challenge because some of the apps required a lot of people to use it. So it was that. And then I think when I was working with bigger companies, the CEOs and that, they just didn't see the benefit. It was kind of like trying to convince them of Facebook in the early days. And we did that too. They were like, why do I need to know what somebody's eating that day? Like, that's how they saw Facebook. They didn't understand. They didn't see it as a marketing opportunity. Sure. And CEOs are a lot of times very late to the game on this stuff. And that was one of the challenges because my job was really to convince people to do it. And Jason was doing a lot of the building. And so it was really challenging just to get people to see how their company could utilize this technology.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that is quite challenging. So, I mean, of course, then in saying that, the first introduction of the App Store, must have changed the landscape of the industry, and it must have impacted what you were currently working on, of course, back then. So I'm just wondering, how did it go quickly? Did it go slowly? Like, how big was that change? And how did that happen? How was that for the industry as a whole? That whole change?
Yeah, it was kind of slow, I think, because there was this battle of whether native apps were going to be a thing or was going to be HTML5. And so we were doing both, trying to skirt, where people were living. And so we were doing a lot of web applications and mobile optimization because that was the big thing that people needed. They needed their websites to show up in mobile view because we started to see the traffic on the internet changing from 10% mobile to 50% mobile. Like it was fast. That part was pretty crazy.
Yeah.
So we were tracking like where people's traffic was coming from, whether it was desktop or mobile. And so we were convincing them, hey, you need a mobile, thing. And so that part happened pretty fast. That was the first big jump. And we started doing a lot of HTML5 stuff because we weren't sure if native was going to hold up. It's funny to say it now, but man, that was a big debate in those days.
Really? I can imagine, actually.
Big debate. Yeah. I mean, that was Steve Jobs and all that. They were all in the middle of that, like they were, and he says, we're not going to use Flash and allow Flash. So Adobe and him were at war. So there was so much going on and you just had to like pick a battle where you were going to go,
Exactly. Sounds like it was such a exciting time. I mean, look, there's exciting things happening in the various industries, specifically in tech these days, which we'll cover a little bit later. But
Sure.
I mean, it's so crazy that back then everything was almost new, you know.
Mhm. Mhm.
These days it's really hard to be surprised by things, I think, especially in the tech world. You think, you find out about something and it's like, oh wow, actually, yeah, of course we can do that. But back then it was like, that can be done, and it's almost like there's a little bit of suspicion around that.
Mhm.
um, so I think that might have also slowed down that kind of thing. I think you even mentioned earlier about CEOs. um, so I'm sure that must have played quite a big part too.
Yeah, it's a lot of times just because you can do it, there's funding required, right? If you're on these big projects. So without getting the people writing the checks to believe, the R&D doesn't get done. And the riskier the R&D is, the more, that's kind of going to make people not want to do it sometimes because the risk is too high. Like that's happening right now in a lot of AI projects. But that, even with all of that, it's where the funding flows is kind of where a lot of things get done. And so your job so much is about convincing people that these risks are not too risky, that they're worth the return on investment, and so that's, to me, that's my battle, and it's been my battle for 15 years. Yeah,
I'm sure most people in your position have that battle, especially when it comes to investors. I think I saw a few of your shorts on YouTube actually about, being ready for investors and the things that you need to keep in mind. Would you like to share one or two of those, actually?
yeah. So yeah, as far as like preparing for investment, I think the biggest problem with people getting money, that the biggest challenge is people don't know how to prepare for investment and to be ready, because investors want to give you money. I think people don't understand that. Like, they are dying to give you the money. The problem is they're looking for a specific thing, and most of the time you are not that thing. And that's the challenge. And that thing that they're really looking for is they're looking for a person, most importantly. It's way more important than the product. We can fix a product, we can't fix a person.
Yeah.
So the person is the most important thing. And then, is that does that person have realistic expectations in a vision where this thing's going to go? Or are they just kind of living in the sky, which is, you just eliminated about 80% of entrepreneurs right there. So that's a big part of it. And then are they prepared to get a check? So say they wanted to break out their checkbook that day, which just not normally how it works, but say they wanted to. And I've seen it. I've seen them break it out in a restaurant before, and
wow. Okay.
Absolutely. 250,000 at lunch. Yeah, that was that was a crazy day. So, so when they want to, you would have to have the proper paperwork, the proper data, the proper deck. You need to have everything prepared. And part of what I do with a lot of founders is really try to prepare them in my coaching, so that if they are going to be invested in, that they're prepared for it.
Okay, perfect. So when you're saying like they care more, or not care more, but that it's more about the person. So you're looking for someone that's obviously creative, hardworking, has a good head on their shoulders, stuff like that, right?
Yeah, I think most people think that they need to be tech forward people. I actually suggest that they're not most of the time. I would rather see them be marketing forward, more of a salesperson or a marketing person as opposed to a tech person. You can have a partner who's technology driven, but a lot of times a tech person has there has to be somebody selling it, right? And if you look at that marriage of like probably the most classic one is Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, right? You had this tech guy, and then you had this great sales guy, and you put these two guys together. But Jobs was also a product person. So he understood people and psychology, and he understood all of that. And so when you get two people that do that well together, you have this really wonderful marriage, and that makes for a great investment. You have a good chance because you have the executor and you have the idea salesperson. And I think you see most of the time that relationship work out better than being a straight up Mark Zuckerberg or somebody like that. I don't know that's the ideal in most cases, although that seems to be a good investment too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I guess it just depends. But I think that's similar to yourself and Jason then, actually, right?
Yeah, it's funny because at first I was the techie one.
Yeah.
And he really had more of a knack for it though.
Yeah.
But at first I was the one who made the apps and did a lot of the design. But I kind of reached my peak, right? I didn't have a bigger ceiling, and he did. And I recognized it happened probably about 10, 11 years ago. And I just told him, I said, why don't you just do that and I'll take care of the other stuff. And yeah, and that was kind of, I had to give up what I really enjoyed doing in some cases, but I had this higher ceiling in the other side. And so it was a great marriage in that sense. And now we have Robbie on the board, who's our creative director, and he's genius. And so having all those really talented people in the same building working together every day is amazing. Yeah.
So on that note, I'd like to talk a little bit more about naked development, actually. Before we get really into some of the harder hitting questions or a bit deeper into it, can you maybe provide our listeners with an overview of the services that naked development offers to their clients?
Yeah, it's changed a lot over the years. So my big dream was many years ago, because we would make something and then somebody couldn't market it, or we would design something and somebody couldn't make it, or they couldn't get funding and all these things. And so my big dream was always at Naked Development to be this ecosystem. And so really, when people ask us to describe ourselves, I'd say we're consultancy first, but we are almost like an incubator. So people will come to us with ideas and we can design it, we can develop it right here in the United States. We build all of our stuff right here in Irvine, California. And we design it all locally, and then we market it all locally. So we have a film production group. We do all of it. So it's a very seamless experience for marketing it. The whole vision and strategy is all with the same people. That's a really unique situation to be able to pull that off and then try to provide funding. We have investor events. We do stuff like that we can guarantee someone that they will get in front of investors. I don't know anybody else making that claim in the market. So I never thought I could be able to do that, but we do it all the time.
That's what I wanted to ask now. Like, how on earth did you guys pull all of this off? I mean, it must have been such a process to get where you guys are today.
Very tedious, very patient. It was hard. Yeah, it was very, very difficult. Yeah. What's that?
I believe you. It must have been quite hard. It must have been challenging. I mean, but obviously the payoff has been great. I mean, you guys have been able to do so much in, I'd say, a relatively short space of time, right? I mean, how long did you guys do that for?
Yeah, so we were making apps with a previous company and until about 5 years ago, and Jason and I just decided to go out on our own. And we said, hey, let's do it our way. So yeah, it's been 5 years. We've doubled in revenue every single year since we started, and we're on track to do that again this year, which is not supposed to happen, right? You're not supposed to do that. What's that?
I'm saying congratulations.
Oh,
that's incredible.
Yeah, so we've grown, and we have 200, 300 people that approach us every month to try to do a project. So, and then we have to only take on the best of the best, right? Like that's what we look for. Yeah. And then we've worked with incredible people like, Peter Thiel and, we've worked on projects for Mark Cuban and, like stuff like that. And you're just like, you're just like pinching yourself that you got that opportunity in 5 years. Yeah. What's that?
I was just about to say, you must be pinching yourself some days.
Oh, all days. Yeah. Even meeting Peter was a pretty cool experience. Yeah.
Absolutely. I've seen him. It's on Shark Tank, right? Yeah. I think I've seen him on there.
Well, Mark Cuban's on Shark Tank. Peter Thiel would be, one of the original PayPal mafia people, as they call it. He was, and then first investor in Facebook too. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Wow. But I mean, look, you have obviously put in the work. to get where you are today. And you've surrounded yourself with great people. I mean, I think there was one thing that you mentioned in a previous interview that I saw with you and someone I can't remember, but I remember you saying that the key to developing a really good app, or for app developments, is having a great team behind you and having a great designer, and the rest will kind of just fall into place, right?
Yeah, it's really unfortunate that a lot of people will start something that they think is going to be world-changing, disruptive, and they'll start from their budget, and then they'll go, well, what can I afford? And I understand finances are reality, but I don't necessarily think that's the way to start. I think you have to go, what do I need to be successful? And then ask yourself, how can I get what it's going to take to do that? Like, to me, I think it's backwards. And I think that's why that initial thought, I think, is the reason why most people fail. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you've obviously achieved a lot, as I was saying earlier. I mean, I think you guys have launched like 300 apps and have like 3.7 million app downloads on the App Store at the moment.
And counting. Yeah.
And counting, yeah. And I'm just wondering how on earth you guys managed to do that. I mean, obviously it's an incredible feat. But that's quite rare, I think, for an app development company to be able to have done that. So I just want to know, what were the things that you guys really would say is the way to go when it comes to launching apps and gets you guys to be as successful as you are?
It's so funny. We had our team meeting yesterday, and we were saying the thing we have to do well is launch apps. Like that's what we focus on. Launch apps. You have to get them into the world, and that is it's a very difficult feat, from idea all the way to actually launching something properly into the world. So to me, I think one of the things that we do very differently than a lot of companies is we don't see anything as a one size fits all. I think there's a lot of one size fits all strategies out there. And to me, it's just not honest. I don't think it's realistic. And so every strategy has to be different. And so on the marketing side, I'm in every single marketing strategy meeting, like absolutely. Yeah, I write every strategy for marketing personally, because it has to be thought through, and you have to have a very unique strategy for each piece of software. And so the thing I try to do most is, I think if you're going to disrupt, if you're going to really get people's attention, you have to create a movement. You can't create a product. People are trying to create products. People don't want to buy products anymore. They want to be a part of something they believe in.
Exactly.
And that's the thing that really gets people's attention.
That's so true. I think, especially in these days, people want something that, I myself want to find something that I can trust. And I know there's there's transparency as well. It's just something that what a company stands for. And you don't want to be supporting someone that you don't agree with in other senses. So I think transparency is great for marketing, for sure.
Sure.
And it is it's a great thing to be able to believe in something. And you're right, the product should be good. Of course, a product should be good. But I think that the company as a whole needs to be great as well. It's a thing. But as you were saying, like you write every marketing strategy. I can totally see that, by the way. I can see you doing that.
Oh, I am crazy. I don't know how long that will last, but we'll see. Yeah. It is right now. That's the truth. Yeah.
How would you say you guys are attracting new users and retaining the existing ones in today's super competitive market on the App Store, of course?
Yeah, I think it starts from that message. It's a narrative that you have to tell. And, you can't shy away from people hating you too, by the way. Let me just say that. If you're going to pick a side in this polarizing world that we have, right? You have to pick the side of who your user is, and I don't shy away from controversy either. I don't really care what anybody thinks about me. And that by having that mentality, you really bolster that following that you have, right? Like, so if people really believe in you, they're going to believe in you even more, that you don't care, that whole, insecurity, caring so much about what people think, that is just it's a terrible path, right? So, as a company, it is too. It's not just for people; it's for companies, right? Like, you can't. If there's a group of people that hates you, well, if they're not your customer, who cares?
Exactly. You have other people that you can focus on. Absolutely.
Yeah, I focus on the people that really love you. And so some of the apps that we've done, that I've advised, on marketing, I've tried to tell them to lean into who they are, into who their customer is, instead of shying away from it, because the tendency is to try to be down the middle. I don't want to alienate anybody. But when you do that, you're basically saying, I want to be ignored.
Yeah, exactly. Because doesn't that kind of tie in with finding your niche and then marketing towards your niche? I mean,
yeah.
Isn't that what it is,
Yeah. A good example is enterprise companies don't really come to us very much. We used to do that, but because we're so startup centric, the language we use, the things we say, they don't really attract enterprise the way that you would think. If they're launching a new thing, maybe, but only, we're so startup centric that the people that come to us is 90% startups. We just see that it's because that's who we're speaking to. That's the avatar that we speak to. So I think you have to really dive into who that is, who your customer is, what's their dream outcome. That's Alex Hormozi, if you haven't read the book. And then really go after and speak to them and try to solve all their problems, all their problems, whether they make you money or not. It's not about that. It's, can you solve all their problems? Because if you can solve all their unique problems, then you're really the only probably resource out there for them.
Exactly. So it's basically like that age-old saying, if you build it, they will come type thing.
In some sense, if you have to obviously get your voice out there so people know you exist. But yes, I think that I do think creating a great product makes the message more powerful, right? And you have to speak, you have to be out there. You can't go, I'm not going to be on social media. You have to be on social media. You have to do all the things to get your voice out there. And once you do that, there's an audience out there for you, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay. How would you say Naked Development measures the success of its apps? So, like, are there any key metrics that you guys are looking for, or, how do you track and evaluate like your app's performance?
Well, obviously, daily active users is the most probably important metric that there is out there when it comes to apps, right? So it's like, how often does somebody open up and look at that app? However, if it's a banking app, that might not be near as important as a social media app, right? Like, where daily active users is everything. So I would say each KPI is a little different when it comes to analytics and stuff like that. But probably, to me, the growth of the user base is everything. Not downloads so much. We don't really care about downloads. It's more about the user base growing, for that specific app. And I think that is the company itself growing, not just user base, but is the company growing? Is their valuation doubling and tripling, each year? And so we've seen some crazy valuations and stuff we've worked on, we had one company go from zero to a $200 million valuation inside 3 years. And yeah, that's a crazy number, right? They got 30 million in funding, and they just leaps and bounds. It's crazy. So when and we've had like 3 different companies go over $100 million valuation just the last couple of years. So it's nuts when you see that kind of growth. You obviously are extremely excited, and that's a great metric. So you can't get that at all. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so kind of to follow up to that,
Mhm.
of course, you need to track all of the people that are using your app and all of that. And as you said, it really depends on the app that you're using. You'll be tracking them differently. But how does, how can developers use data to increase downloads and improve user engagement from there?
Oh, that's such a great question because the data is everything. I don't really
Yeah.
care, what your family says about it. I'm so tired of hearing my family really likes the app. It just doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
It's the data of the people you don't know that matter, and you should be obsessed with that data. To me, it's about, and it's one of the hardest things to do is to say not even what the data is, but what does it say,
Mhm.
right? What is this data implying to us? And so understanding the flow of the app itself and where people are falling off, where they're spending their time, even before they download it, the funnel itself before that, like understanding how all that connects and seeing where the user is leaving is everything. And if you're not constantly making those tweaks, people want to do it all at once. They want to make an app perfect the first time and they want it to be used. That is just not a realistic world. You have to make something small and you need to perfect that flow, and then you need to build on incrementally. And as you do that, you maintain what was working and you add and take little risks as you go.
Exactly.
And if you keep doing that, you will have a wonderful product that people love. If you try to do it all at once, you're probably just going to end up with a mess and it will never go anywhere. And that's probably the hardest thing founders don't really understand is they want it all to happen at once instead of patiently understanding it's going to take time, to get there. You might get users fast, but you still might fumble their experience once you get them.
Absolutely. So basically, like you have this initial idea and you
Yeah.
create the app and you start tweaking and you're like, okay, shoot, this isn't working. I need to kind of adjust here, adjust there until you get something perfect. So that's what I mean. Like, the idea changes, but not necessarily the founder.
Well, you think of Slack as one of the best examples of that, right? They started out as a game, right? And then they built this amazing chat inside the game. And as the chat was doing really well, the game wasn't so great. They went, oh, let's build this. Let's use this chat we built, and people seem to love it, and we'll just make that available to people. And $30 billion later or whatever, it was a huge success. And he did that twice, by the way, the same founder. So it's interesting how pivots, if they're listening to the people, I see a lot of people make pivots based on their own emotions. That's not a great pivot. A pivot based on what the market is doing makes a lot of sense. So I think if you're listening to the user and you see the users doing this thing and you're like, well, maybe we should just do that thing. And that's kind of what I'll say. I'll go, hey, have you noticed that we have this really cool thing that they love? Let's just really lean into that and then get rid of all of our dreams, and it's kind of narcissistic to only want to build what you build. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean that. I mean, you might have a really good initial idea, but that definitely, it's kind of like doors opening. You start with something and it kind of snowballs into something else, and you just take it from there. I think you're still creating something from your initial idea, which I think is awesome.
If you build something that people love, what is the problem?
Exactly. So, I mean, look, there must be some of the biggest mistakes that businesses make, when trying to increase like app downloads and, even during these times. I think we just kind of covered some of that, not really pivoting when it's necessary. Can you maybe give us some insight to how businesses can avoid those types of pitfalls?
Yeah. So one of the biggest principles I use comes from Jim Collins, the writer of Good to Great. And he has a principle that I really apply to marketing in a big way, and that is fire bullets before you fire cannonballs.
Yeah.
So I use that to how you spend money is very important in marketing. So I love ads. I love, using, influencers. I love throwing money at these things. However, you don't know what's going to work in your particular situation. So a lot of times people try to buy success. They want to, because it's a quick thing, right? Like if I go into this big contract, these guys are going to kill it for me and they'll buy success. Even with us, we can't do that. Nobody can.
Exactly.
So you will make a huge risk and you don't know if it's going to pay off. And so as you start to try things, and I'm a big fan of trying things, but I think you want to focus your attention on one thing at a time and spend small amounts of money before you spend big amounts of money. So to me, that's a really important thing to focus on. I used this illustration yesterday. If we were trying to move furniture out of a room and there were two couches, we would never go, hey, you lift that couch and I'll lift this couch and then we'll get out. You'd be like, hey, let's both lift this couch and then we'll go both lift the other couch. You'll do one thing at a time. And I think often people are just like trying to shotgun through a lot of stuff and they're throwing money all around, see what sticks, as they say. I don't know. I like to focus piece by piece methodically. And to me, that's one of the things you have to do. And you have to be patient. You have to let the advertising or whatever it is that you're using allow it to either succeed or fail. You don't know if you had a bad day the first day, you didn't fail. You need more data.
Exactly.
Yeah, but people bail so quick. They're just like, oh, I tried that didn't work. And I'm like, wow, that was quick.
And you really give it space to grow and root out, I guess. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So as you know, DesignRush has a directory of like the top mobile app development agencies globally. How would you say businesses can actually benefit from outsourcing their app development needs to like a professional agency like yourselves?
Yeah, I think the thing that we really do is we reduce the amount of mistakes you'll probably make. So a lot of people think, oh, they're expensive or whatever because we're obviously one of the higher priced ones. But I think we reduce the amount of mistakes and we reduce the amount of time because we already are a team that work together. When you try to go find lots of different little pieces and you got to bring a team together, that's a really hard thing to do. And it takes a lot of time for that team to work well together. So we kind of just like, you call us and plug and play. You have a design group, a marketing group, and a development group that all love each other and spend time together. We're all getting beers later today. So, like that is a very hard thing to find. And you can just hire that and have a great team right away, a world-class team immediately.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you're going to reduce the amount of mistakes. So I always ask this question when I talk to founders. I say, if this goes well, in 3 to 5 years, what will this company be worth? And they always inflate the number, right? It's always way bigger. It's always, $1 billion. It's $100 million. And they might be right. Because I've seen it. It definitely happens, right? So they'll say that and I'll say, so are you really going to decide your success or failure over $100,000 or, you know what I mean? Like we're talking about big numbers. And so if you think you're going to just outsource that to a place that gave you rock bottom prices and you're somehow going to be successful, I don't know. I'm like, that's pretty risky. I try to hire the best possible people. To me, you want to stack the deck on talent. Do you have the best possible people? Because now you have a really good shot at being successful. Because it's hard enough out there than to try to do it on substandard people. Yeah.
Exactly. I think it's really important to like highlight the fact that you can have a world-class team literally at the tips of your fingers and, like you said, have been working together for years, love each other, work really well together, produces absolutely amazing high quality apps, or any types of content for that matter. And I think that's definitely one of the things that stood out to me for that. I think people actually take that for granted when they're just starting out.
So much, so
Yeah,
much so. They just they go, oh, my buddy programs. That's not a
exactly.
good standard for starting a world-class company that you're trying to change the world. You know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, okay, I want to pivot this a little bit to another
Okay.
question now. Um, so say for instance, someone has a really great idea for an app, okay?
Hmm.
Anybody, okay, has a really great idea, but they have no initial investment capital.
Hmm.
What advice would you give them?
Yeah. So I tell people spend your time and effort on marketing first. I know it sounds backward.
So, okay.
But I actually, I think what happens is you're trying to create a narrative from the very get-go. I'm a person. I want to raise money.
Hmm.
I want to build this thing. I think it's cool. Start to gather a bunch of people that actually believe in what you're trying to do. You know,
Right.
try to do
So,
that. If you had an audience, I bet investment would come your way.
exactly. So it's kind of like networking with the right people and just
Mhm.
telling them your idea and what it is that you want to do.
Yeah. And design something out. Do your best. I've seen somebody raise $1 million with a terrible looking design before. You know, like if you can do it, but you have to be a go-getter. You've got to put all your energy into it. And it can't be like one of the things you're kind of doing. It's got to be your mission, you know. I
Exactly.
tell young people, I'm like, you got a girlfriend, boyfriend, break up with them. You don't need that right now. You need to go all in on what you're doing. You
Exactly. The
know,
rest will come later.
yeah, you can get it one of those later. You don't
Yeah.
need one now. You know, and I say that a little bit joking, but my point is get the distractions out of your life.
Sure.
And most people are like, well, yeah, I'm doing this thing on the side, and they don't have this. I'm all in. I'm literally living in a basement so that this is the only thing I can do. You have to go all in. That's what everybody who went before you, that's what they did.
I think that if you're passionate about something and you really, really want to make it work, it does have to be your life. Um, and it does, it makes sense. And maybe that's why there's only a very select few people that actually do manage to get across that threshold. Because let's be honest, there is one, you know.
Hmm.
Um, and it really does take that amount of dedication, I think, for sure.
I always try to think of like what other people do in other industries. Like, say I wanted to be an Olympic athlete. Think of the sacrifice that an
Exactly.
Olympic athlete goes through. Do you
Exactly.
think that being a startup owner is any different?
No, of course not.
It's not. You're trying to change the world. How do you think you're going to do that without using the disciplines of an Olympic athlete as an example?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, I also know that you mentioned that you live your life through apps, which is understandable,
Mhm.
obviously. I mean, it's what you do. So, I would really like to know what is the funniest thing you use an app for, if there is any?
I'm going to look on my phone here to think of which one it
Okay.
is. Um, that's so funny. What a crazy. You know, it's so funny. I love cooking a lot.
Yeah.
And I get really into it. I've actually won a couple barbecue competitions. And uh,
Amazing.
yeah, so one of my things is I love these Bluetooth thermometers. That's not a funny thing, but I use one of those. Have you seen these?
That.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So you can put the thermometer into your meat, right? And then while I'm walking around the house, I have a certain range, and I can see how long it's going to take to get, until the meat's done. That's really hard to do as a cook,
Yeah,
but the
absolutely.
thermometers are pretty accurate. So, and so if you're doing a long cook or something like that, I just have like a bunch of these Bluetooth thermometers around, and I've been using those for years now. I think I've maybe 4 years, 5 years now. Yeah, I love that. My coffee maker runs on an app.
Yes.
There's a video on that one.
I think I
That
have
one's
seen
cool.
that one. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
That's where I saw that you live your life through apps, and you mentioned that one actually.
yeah. There's so many. I mean, like I have all kinds of wireless gadgets for health purposes, and my
Of
blue.
course.
I take my blood pressure every day with an app. It's crazy the amount of apps I use in a day.
Are there any of those that you created yourself that you use every day?
It's funny. There's one I really, really like that we're re-releasing right now. There's a few, but I would say one that we're re-releasing right now called ClickWatch.
Okay.
And it's like when you're trying to watch you want to know, hey, what should I go watch on TV, on Netflix or whatever? Because I kind of gel out at the end of the night and I just have nothing left. And so I do my Netflix binge, before I go to bed. And
As we all
there's a whole bunch of people at Naked on ClickWatch, and we share shows that we like. And so you get to see like what other people have watched and if it was any good. And you're like, oh yeah. So I really like that app. It's really cool. And I can't wait. We're going to re-release it. And the one I really want, I want the TV version because I want to be able to check it out from my TV and see the shows I'm watching. So we're going to release that at some point, but right now it's just on the mobile. It's really cool.
I'm definitely going to keep my eyes peeled for that because most of the time I feel like binging something at night and I can't decide what to watch.
Yeah, you keep running through like, what's Netflix telling me? I would want to listen to my friends. Yeah, what are my friends watching? Yeah,
exactly. And then at least you have something to talk about after as well.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway.
So we're finally getting to it. Your opinions of AI and how that's going to affect the app development industry.
It's
what
going
do you think?
to change everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It already is. Yeah, it already is. We're already utilizing a lot of AI in the office to do certain processes. We've created certain IP that we own now that we don't release to anybody else that is speeding up the process of building apps. And so, I personally see a day very, very soon. Watch for it, where you could come into our office. This is my dream, right?
Okay.
Come into our office and we could spend a day with you because we do a 2-day thing. We work on your product one day and we work on your marketing the next. Okay. And fly from all over the world to come to our office to do that, right? So what I want to be able to do is have you stay a week and maybe we're delivering your app by the end of that week. Done. I actually think we're going to get there. And I think we're going to do it in the next year or two. Yeah.
That would be
insane.
Such a game changer.
I think we'll be able to launch apps within a couple of weeks.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but did you ever think that we would get to this stage? You probably did.
No, not without low code or something like that, where you're not building something custom. I'm talking fully custom product that we'll be able to build it that fast. Now, it's still going to take a lot of people and you're still going to have to be intensively working on it. But I think we're speeding up and we're seeing the speed of processes happen.
Incredible.
Where we're going to be able to do it much, much faster. And so I'm excited about that because I think the period of time it takes to go through that is very painful for people. Yeah.
For sure. I think it is. I mean, there's also a lot of going back and forth, especially when you're working with clients. So I think that would really, really be super revolutionary to do. Within a week or two. Wow. That would be crazy. That would be unheard of, really, to be honest.
Oh, it's coming. It's coming. Just wait.
Exactly.
I am literally working on it as we speak. Yeah.
So I'd like to talk a little bit more about the UI and UX design. What would you say are some of the tips for designing an app that's both functional and aesthetically pleasing? What are the go-to things? Are they? The
number one tip is to have my co-founder on your team because he's one of the best in the world. That helps a lot. You want to talk a genius, not to talk him up so much, but he's such a freaking genius when it comes to UI UX. And he has 10 designers on his team, and he's just how he keeps it all straight. I'll never understand. But he just sees it all in working together. So to me, it's all about the architecture of simplicity. And that's really the whole reason for the name behind Naked. It's about simplicity. And the architecture around simplicity and the workflow around that is so critical. And what I see a lot of young founders do is they go and design their own app. And I have nothing against them giving it a shot.
Yeah.
But I can tell you, it takes a tremendous amount of experience to do what these designers do, about how to make something as simple to use as possible. I downloaded an app yesterday, and it was one I heard on a podcast, and I downloaded it. I was like, I track my macros on my food every day, and I weigh all my food. I'm stupid. So I do that. And so I heard of this new app, and I got on there, and I thought about leaving my fitness pal for this. And I got on there, and the experience was so confusing that I immediately got rid of my trial. And I was like, it was such a good idea, but poorly executed, that I was like, oh, that sucks. I really wanted this to be good,
Yeah.
And we've all been there, right? Like, if an app is confusing, we just won't use it.
It really is all about the user experience and making things as simple as possible, I think.
Yeah, and I just think people think that that's easier than it really is. It's simple is hard. Simple is not easy. So a lot of times people go, oh, this will be really easy. It's simple.
Yeah.
To me, that's an oxymoron. That's not, simple is difficult.
Why do you say that is, though? Why do you think that is? Why is simplicity so hard for people to? Because
we always want more. We always think more is better. We hear founders use this word robust a lot. It needs to be robust. And that, to me, spells founder insecurity. I call it app insecurity. It's like, if my app doesn't do enough, it won't be successful. There's this discipline of saying no that is so critical that people don't have. It's not intuitive at all. It's counterintuitive.
Yeah.
But you think of Amazon, they called it Amazon. It was huge. That's a big thing, right? The biggest river in the world, right? So he clearly had a big vision, but what was his first product? Used books. So that takes a lot of discipline, and that was the first sign of greatness of Jeff Bezos. Is his ability to just go, if we can sell used books, we can sell anything.
Exactly.
That's
so
it.
It's focusing on the niche of the product that you're selling and honing in on that and really making that work before you take it any further, and it's keeping it simple.
Focus is the hottest commodity there is, and very few people have it.
Absolutely. I think you get distracted by what other people are doing constantly, or, oh, this is the latest trend. And I mean, look, I don't think there's anything wrong with keeping up with the trends. Of course, that's something that we all should do. But I think there is something timeless to what it is that you're saying right now. Focusing on the one thing that your app can do, that you're really good at. It's the thing that and as you said, tweak it as you're going along. But then, take it from there, but really focus on getting that really, really solid before you carry on to something else. Yeah,
and that right there is a battle with every client.
I'm sure.
It really is. That is the hardest thing we do is to keep a client focused. Yeah.
I think that kind of goes for most industries, to be honest.
Yeah. There's just so many distractions. We have more distractions than ever before.
Exactly.
And so that's why my life, I live it so simply, because I don't want distractions. I spend a lot of time by myself. I don't have a lot of moving parts. I keep it really, really simple, because then you can think clearly and you don't have all this noise to battle.
And influence your creativity. Exactly.
Yeah, it's honestly extremely freeing too, and I think that's what people don't realize is they're actually making it more complicated for themselves. Yeah,
exactly. So okay, I think we've kind of touched on this a little bit, but I want to hone in on this a bit more. How important is branding for your app? Like, what are the factors that developers should consider when designing the app branding, like right from the get-go, like from the logo to, you know, how that all plays a part? Because I mean, of course, the logo is like the main thing that people see on their home screen.
Yeah. It's so funny. Logos to me is one of the most arbitrary things there is in the process, because I hear people go, that's a good logo, or this is a good logo. And I'm like, really? Have you looked at the logos that are the most important companies in the world? They're just a font. They're a font. That's all they are. And yet people, they have this, logo insecurity almost. It's like, it's got to have all these elements and do all these things. And I'm like, really? Most great logos are just a font. So I would just say, and I do think an icon, it's important for an app. It is good. So I love branding and I love that process. But I wouldn't say it's everything at all. I would say you should do it. You should go through the process. It's more about, what do you believe and what are your values? To me, that's more important than the logo. The logo will become something if there's meaning behind it. You know, you take our name. The criticism I got for calling a company Naked from the get-go, you have no idea how the kind of craziness of the things that people said, like, why would you call a company that, you know? But after we had a name, nobody cared. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Just brings it down to simplicity once again, which is, I think, the biggest takeaway from this is simplicity and focusing on everything, you know, and we're all born naked in our most simple states, you know, and that's what it is, and that's what designing is. And I really find that quite interesting. I don't understand why people have such a problem, or had such a problem, with the word naked.
Well, it just sounded provocative. So we've had, people thought I did it to just be provocative, and I was like, no, that's not the whole point. No, listen, it didn't hurt that it is. Yeah, it did. Yeah, it didn't hurt,
Yeah, exactly.
So wink, wink. Yeah, maybe it was in there somewhere, but for the most part, it had more meaning than that.
Yeah, exactly. So we're gonna wrap up pretty soon, but
okay.
I'd like to find out from you just one more thing. Mm-hmm. What is the challenge, or the biggest challenges for developing apps for multiple platforms like iOS and Android? And, how can people overcome that? What are the differences that they need to consider? Those kinds of things. Like, how do people navigate that?
Yeah, so that was a big deciding factor when we left the previous company, is we were straight up iOS programmers and Android programmers. And so we had the triad of programmers. You had the back end and the two front end programmers. Sure. And when we started Naked, we thought that the time had come for us to do cross-platform programming. And so we went strictly a React Native company. Like, we don't necessarily work in other platforms. If you don't want React Native, we're not working with you. It's that simple, so, and that's kind of the old Southwest Airlines model, is like, we have one type of programmer, and it makes it easier for us to work on each other's work and to be more efficient. And so, I think cross-platform, there was a day when that was a concern, and there were things that it couldn't do. The camera specifically is still the small concern. If you're doing a weird camera thing, you might need to have a native app. But it's 99% of the time, it's not a challenge at all. So, and I'll tell you if it is, but I think cross-platform, it saved 40% of, programming. And so it was a game changer when we started, by having one type of programmer was huge for us. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, okay. So thank you so much for that.
Sure.
There's one more question I want to ask you, and it's a bit of a fun one and more of a personal interest, to be honest, because I couldn't find anything to back this up. But I think one of your favorite movies might be one of my favorite movies, which is Forgetting Sarah Marshall.
Very good.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's really good. It's so
Oh,
funny. It's
videos,
one of my
yeah.
favorite comedies, honestly. And I
Yeah.
know that you guys took inspiration from Kunu, or I don't know. Explain to me what happened there because I saw a little clip of an interview that you did previously,
Yeah.
and you guys were quoting Kunu. It's the less you do, the less you do, the more you do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and I don't necessarily want to go into that, quotes of his because you kind of explained it there already. But I just kind of want to find out, like, how has that influenced you guys as a whole? Like the movie, like, how does that play? How does
It's
that
so funny because we actually quote Kunu around the office sometimes, and I always go, do less, right? And
yeah,
that Paul Rudd is amazing in that part.
amazing.
So I just commissioned the marketing team to make a shirt that
Okay.
Kunu says do less, and I wanted to have that on the front, and we'll put it on our store or whatever. But yeah, it was just, we just thought, we always say do less, and we're always talking about, making things simple. And that's just such a big part of our whole identity as a company that we all got to kick out of Kunu. So we were just like, yeah, it came up and we're like, oh, we have to put Kunu on the YouTube page.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so basically the whole company watched Forgetting Sarah Marshall and everybody was like,
absolutely.
Kunu is the guy that we are going to be following from here on.
Absolutely. Maybe we could do it again. If Paul Rudd was around, we could get him to pull a Kunu. That would be amazing. Yeah.
Oh, well, maybe that's going to happen sooner than you think. Who knows? Might be pinching yourself again.
Yes, maybe. That'd be cool.
Exactly. John, thank you so much for joining us today. Seriously, I mean, we've gone a bit over time, but I really appreciate you sitting down and having this chat. It was really, really insightful, and I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
And that wraps up today's episode. Simplicity and a focus on user experience are truly vital for the success of any app. The process of designing an app that is intuitive and easy to use requires a significant amount of expertise and experience. So, if you're searching for a reliable mobile app design agency for your business, visit designrush.com/marketplace. Our marketplace offers a wide selection of thoroughly vetted agencies that can provide you with the solutions you need to turn your dream mobile app into a reality. Once again, I'm your host, Bianca Mayer. Stay curious and catch us in the next episode.